All right. Hey, we've got our first participant.
Hi,
Ingrid.
Hi, Ingrid.
Hey.
Are you recording?
Yeah, I'm recording.
Yeah.
Hi, Ingrid.
Oh, Bill, that's a very nice picture you've put up. Look, you're in two places at once. I love
I'm in
it.
two places at once. That's right. Yeah. See me here. They see me there.
It's Gary coming in.
Hey, Gary.
Great.
Yep. Hi, Gary.
Right.
Gary, you look absolutely ready for action as a professional in your shirt and tie. I love it.
All right. Thank you.
We just don't see it very often these days, do we?
No, you're putting us all to shame with
Everyone working from home, they come onto Zoom in their
hush puppies,
pajamas.
pajama bottoms, and business shirt. Yeah, that's right.
Hi, Sarah.
Howdy.
Hi, everyone.
Got Lisa coming in. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Hi.
So we've got Kerry and Samantha to come, right?
Oh, I know what I could do. This is
I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to eat my lunch, so I'm going to stop video so you don't have to watch me, but I will be listening. I promise.
All right, Ingrid. Lisa, right, sorry.
Lisa.
Jump in whenever you're ready. Hey, look, you could see me in two places.
Oh, that is funny.
Anne, I just noticed I have you on the agenda doing the acknowledgement of country and also the acknowledgement of consumer and carer lived experience.
Yes.
I only just noticed that now. Is that something you'd be able to do, or do you want to?
Yeah, not a problem.
Yep.
Bill very kindly has helped me out with that. I think I did it last time too.
Excellent.
You did.
So we'll just wait a couple of minutes more for to see if Kerry and Samantha come on. Oh, and Donna's not coming on today, right?
So we've got Fiona, Irene, and Jennifer as apologies for today.
And what about Donna from the team?
And also Donna.
Okay, good. All right.
Got me in stereo.
Yes, I can turn that off if that's too spooky. Yes.
Oh, that's hilarious, Bill.
Yeah, adds a little novelty to the protocol.
Not even able to do a sneaky.
Oh, Kerry is here. Hi, Kerry. I didn't see you join. Apologies.
Hi, Kerry.
Hey, Kerry.
Okay. I think we might get started. We're waiting for Samantha, but I think we'll get started in the interests of time. So please let me welcome everybody to our committee meeting. I would like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the traditional custodians of this country and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge the people with lived experience as consumers and carers who may be with us in this meeting today and recognise their ongoing commitment and contributions in shaping mental health service delivery in Australia. Thank you. I would like to say there are some apologies today, official apologies from Irene Gallagher, Jennifer Black, Fiona Cromarty and Donna Moore on the ACDC team. And I would also like to ask if anyone has any conflicts of interest, please, and to declare them now. Great, let's move on from that. You have all been copied with a lot of documents, some of them very large actually, from the team and from James. Thank you, James. And the minutes have come out and been reviewed by Bill. Can I have acceptance of those minutes, or rather let me ask it in reverse. Does anybody have any questions or queries on the minutes of our previous meeting? Thank you. All right. So Bill, we have acceptance, sorry, James, we have acceptance of the minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, so we've got Margaret taking some minutes for today's meeting, so she'll note that down.
All right. Can I ask you though, acceptance of minutes, but just to go through some of the actions that came out of the minutes last time and what has been done?
Yep. So just go to the last page of attachment 2, which was the minutes. And I've got a list of the actions there, or the agreed actions from that meeting.
Yep.
So number 1, we've got a reminder for all steering committee members who have not yet done so to send the brief bio and signed ACDC steering committee agreements. There's a couple of people we're still waiting on, which will probably hassle outside of this meeting.
You're not going to do the name and shame.
Should we?
I'm sure they know who they are, and if they haven't, they may get another call from me. Look at that.
Ooh, I want to avoid that if possible. So then the site selection will be discussed at the research and evaluation working group, which we had straight after, or the week after the last steering committee meeting. We did discuss it, and I'll talk to that a little bit later on when we get to a report from that working group. And then we'll discuss the research and evaluation working group to understand the data that we want to have available for researchers to evaluate and how we're going to collect that data. So again, I'll talk to that shortly. Prior to the door knocking, so this is action number 4, prior to door knocking, the ACDC team intends to engage with consumer carer and other stakeholder groups, particularly the COLD and ATSI groups, to discuss the project and get feedback from these established groups. And the partnership engagement team will be working on this one. So we've started that process, I think, through mapping out some of the different peak organizations for consumers and carers in Australia. And then also, I think Hanina in particular has been starting to engage with, in the context of the Southwest Sydney, where we might do our pilot. So we've got a meeting coming up with their, is it the Consumer Advisory Forum in that group, Hanina?
Yes, that's correct. So Southwest Sydney PHN runs a consortium of consumer and care advisory group. So we will be conducting a consultation with them on the 24th of August.
And then I think more broadly, we're looking at doing a similar kind of feedback consultation process with consumer and carer organisations and potentially COLD and ATSI organisations nationally, the ones that are able to meet with us and give us a little bit of time and feedback into our project. Am I accurate in suggesting that, Hanina?
Yeah, that's correct. We're in conversations with Tharawal Incorporation within Southwest Sydney and getting their advice on some of our processes for our pilot site that we're planning to do in Aids or Claymore. And also similarly, we're doing the same thing in terms of consulting with peak organisation and around COLD communities and getting advice on that as well. And I'm more than happy to update you in the next meeting about in terms of how we go with those meetings.
Great, thank you for that. So up to number 5, action number 5, the ACDC team is developing a separate COVID-19 contingency plan to work out how we'll respond to COVID-19. So just a reminder that we've got a lot of infection control and workplace health and safety things documented in our risk management plan and what we'd like to train our people connectors in how to respond to the risk of COVID-19 and other infections in communities. But more at a higher level, the more broader impact that COVID-19 could potentially have on this project. We've put that into a revision of our proposed activity work plan that we've sent to our funders, waiting on that one to be given the thumbs up by the funders. But there's 3 different contingencies that we've built into that plan, and the first being if we're going to continue with our proposed timeline, then we'll probably look to exclude states where there's significant COVID-19 community presence. So for example, Victoria, maybe New South Wales from the first round of the project. And what we'd do is we'd double up on some of the other states if we can, and then make it up later down the track in the project. So we're still doing the same number of sites that we intended to in each of the states and territories in Australia. If there was potentially another outbreak in between now and when we did round one sort of nationally, we might be looking at pushing the start of our round one back to next year. We'd spend a little bit more time doing some more co-design of the project, but we'd have to squeeze up the 3 rounds and also the continuous improvement activities in between each round to make the project kind of finish on time. So that's a less desirable outcome. And then potentially we could find ourselves in a position where we're not able to do any door-to-door ACDC activities or any face-to-face ACDC activities, in which case the project would need to be significantly redesigned. And that's a much less desirable outcome, because we find that it's going to be significantly harder for us to achieve the kind of the proactive direct connection component of the project without going door-to-door to people's homes. But that's still in our contingency plan that we've put to the NDIS. So those are the ways that we've built into the project for how we might respond if things were to change with regards to COVID-19. So I'll hold off if there's any questions maybe until after I run through the rest of these actions. Did you have anything to add to that?
It's a big issue and there's a long conversation there, but just note that, for example, organisations like Roy Morgan have begun in the last week to send about 100 door knockers out around Queensland. So people are doing it out there in different states at the moment. So it's not off the agenda here, but it's good. Still, it's good. We've got backup plan A, backup plan B and C. So let's hope we don't have to go there.
Yeah. What am I up to? I'm up to 6. So, okay. So Anne, you'd suggested creating a separate document on key themes and actions on feedback from this committee. So this last page of the actions has, so the last page of the minutes for the last meeting has got a collection of all of the actions. That's where that one sits. I haven't done one in relation to, or we haven't done one in relation to the key themes that came out of the last committee meeting. So
no, I think, James, this is fine. I think being able to see all the actions in one place is really makes it easy for people to absorb what we actioned from the last minutes.
And I think there were, from memory, at least there was a couple of themes that came up that I'll talk to shortly. So, so 7, James to send a co-design and research and evaluation documents to Irene Gallagher for feedback, because I think she couldn't find them or didn't have them in the first place. So I've done that. Irene isn't here with us today, but hopefully she'll have some feedback and some time to read through those documents and such. 8, James to incorporate feedback regarding site selection into the draft of this document. I can't remember which document that was in relation to. I think perhaps the
let me go back, number 8.
It's on page 5 somewhere. And we were looking at
it was after the request for research proposal and request for evaluation proposal that we'd reviewed.
Yeah. So look, anyway, we've got some feedback from this committee in regards to site selection, and that was I think the feedback that we've been working on is to kind of weight towards the western or the smaller Australian states, but also significantly towards rural and remote populations, and then finally to areas where there's likely to be a greater need for the ACDC project, and that might be areas where there's more social disadvantage. So that's what we've progressed with our site selection. We haven't finalized the site selection. I'm really itching to get that one done yet, but in working towards that, we've certainly taken on the feedback and the suggestions from the steering committee in that regard. Anything to add?
Just that there's a few things to cross-reference there. Obviously, our research and evaluation partners have got some input on in terms of if we're to be able to report on data that's reliable and valid, then we need to take into consideration some of their considerations in terms of where and how we collect the data to make sure that it's applicable more broadly across the general Australian population as samples. And there's all sorts of fancy weighting processes that we've been advised by both Roy Morgan and some of the university research partners there. So it's also a process that where we still need to get the buy-in to from the state peaks as well too. It's the same, Jennifer's not here as well too, but it's very important that we keep everybody happy here on this as well too. So it's a complex problem with researchers, steering committee, and peaks having input into. So hopefully though we're triangulating those stakeholder perspectives, and we'll come up with a solution soon, because we need to locate broadly at least a short list of sites in order, if not the definite sites, to begin the next stage, which is going out to the delivery, seeking expressions of interest from delivery partners, which is something we'll talk about shortly.
Okay.
So 9 was the research and evaluation requests for proposals to be taken to the research and evaluation reference of working group. So we did that. We've actually progressed with the request for proposal for the evaluation project. I'll probably talk to that in a bit, but we've got that out there to a number of different institutions, and I think we can expect some responses to those, or some proposals to be submitted within the next 2 weeks. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about those later in this meeting. 10 there was members to provide other suggestions for a short list of people or organisations for the research and evaluation request for proposal, and particularly from so West Australia, Northern Territory and Tasmania. We took on some suggestions. We had quite a few different names suggested in the last steering committee meeting that we had of different organisations and academics. So reached out to each of those. Some of them have responded very positively, and some of them haven't had the capacity to respond to the request for proposal. But we had a pretty good, I'd say a very high level of interest from each of the people that were recommended in each of the names. So,
and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, and Lisa was part of that process too. So she's got the first person perspective on that as well too.
Yes. 11. So look, there was a recommendation from the steering committee for us to include lived experience as a requirement for the request for proposal for the evaluation and research. So as in recommending that responders, or requiring even that responders have a lived experience or a level of peer kind of experience of mental health issues within their research and evaluation teams. So we've done that. I can talk to how we did that. Let me just say we made that as a weighted response, in that if the proposal has a kind of a dedicated identified role for a peer researcher, then they'd be rated, or at least one peer researcher, then they'd be rated out of the highest possible, depending on how well they respond there. If they have if they're able to identify that there's lived experience of mental health issues within their research team, without that being an identified role, then they'd also they'd be rated 3 rather than 4, or out of 3 rather than 4, or weighted out of 3 rather than 4 for that activity. And then finally, if the organisation doesn't have any of those 2, but they are able to evidence that there's a different way that they've had meaningful, or that they've proposed to have meaningful input in the evaluation of our project through from people with lived experience of mental health issues, then they'd still be able to be assessed, and they'd be able to be assessed at a lower rating of maybe 2. I can't remember exactly what it was, but that's how we incorporated that. So if you are responding to this request for proposal, I'd suggest that organisations would be quite keen to be able to be weighted out of the maximum, and to identify that role.
Yep, good.
Yep. So call 12, a call for steering committee members to consider joining the education, training an information products reference group and to inform us. So I think we had a couple of names, and again, those groups, we'll report that shortly.
So James, can I just ask, do we have a member of the steering committee, at least one member of the steering committee on every working group now?
I believe so. Can I just check in with Margaret? Do you have a steering committee member for the education and training working group? Yep, cool. In that case, yes, we've got, oh. Sorry, Margaret, you're on mute, and we've just got you saying yes, but then maybe no.
Yes, not the education and training, only the door knocking.
Right, okay, so we're still looking for a steering committee member to join our group. And did we just see Sam's hand going up?
Yes.
Sure we did.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
Sam.
Thank you.
I'll catch up with you shortly.
No worries.
After this meeting with,
James, do we have someone for the information products from the steering committee? Not in my knowledge, or do you know if anyone's volunteered?
We have a working group set up.
we don't have the working group set up. I did think that we had a name for that working group. So
that was the 5th group, wasn't it? That actually is not yet. I don't think we uploaded that group.
the 4th group, the information products.
Oh yes, research and evaluation, docking, education. Yeah, yes, correct. Sorry, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought we did have a name for that, but I don't have it on the tip of my
Right,
head.
I'll have a look.
Go back and check our notes. Sorry about that.
Okay.
That'll be a fun group.
There you go, guys. There's the incentive.
Mm.
And then 13 was for Anne yourself to contact each committee member by phone within the next month.
Which happened, and I want to take the time to thank each and every one of the committee members for giving me their time and being so generous in sharing their experience, what their careers were, for trying never to use an acronym with me because I was struggling with the acronyms, and really giving me a good understanding of why they were on the committee and what they felt they could contribute. So I started off by being in awe of all your expertise and experience. By the time I finished these calls, I was even more in awe. So I really appreciate your time and generosity. Thank you.
Good. That's fabulous. Anne.
And thank you, Anne. Okay, so that was the action items from the previous meeting. Was there anything else that you wanted to, before we move on, Anne?
No, I think that's great. So James, before I sort of hand it over to you, I just want to make sure everyone's clear on outcomes for today. So where we want to get to by the end of this meeting, this is really a full solid update meeting for us to hear how the working groups have been going. I think going through the actions is really good because we know what happened. It reminds us what happened last time, where we had questions and what has been done or addressed. So really a solid update meeting. So please ask any questions that you might have. We are going to confirm a process of decision making that passes through the working groups and back to the steering committee that James will go through. I think we are going to look for some feedback from the committee on the door knocking partners. And I also finally, I think James is going to touch on asking about a regular date time in the coming months as we book in the meetings, so we can set them up ahead of ourselves. I think we've got one more monthly, James, and then we go to quarterly. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. So we'll float that at the conclusion of this meeting.
Right, so those are the outcomes for this meeting. So just to make it clear what our outcomes are from this meeting. And really now I'm going to hand over to James to do the project update, and then James and Bill will come in on the working group updates. So over to you, James. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I did mention just earlier when we were going through the action items that I prefer people to hold off any questions until after I've finished them. So just before I go to the project update, were there any questions on those action items from the previous meeting? I'm going to move forward then. So just in terms of an update and where we're at with the project, we're still intending to work towards potentially the middle of October for when we can start doing round one of the project. So that's the first doors being knocked. It's creeping up on us, and thinking about all of the things that we need to sort of get done between now and then is a little daunting. Where we're at now, as I alluded to before, we've we're seeking proposals for the evaluation of this project. So we'll get them back. I think the date that they have to have those back by is
The 17th.
well, yeah, 9 a.m. on the 17th, which is a Monday of August. So that's in just under 2 weeks. Once we've got that, we'll, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, we'll have a process of selecting the successful evaluation partner, and then we'll be able to move forward with that one. But also what we need to do is several different things. We need to confirm our ACDC survey and our information products. So what the people connectors will be using when they're talking to people. Also our door knocking guidelines. So all of the scripts and how to do the door knocking of the ACDC project, which a draft was circulated to this committee last week. Then we sort of need to start talking to our, once we selected the sites that we know we're going to do the door knocking in for round one, we need to start an expression of interest process with potential delivery partner organizations in each of those sites. Give them time to respond to that, and then give them time to give the successful ones time to recruit staff members, and then we need to train those staff members in the door knocking guidelines. And throughout all of that process, we also need to engage a data and systems partner to build up our ACDC app onto tablets. So even just talking like that sounds like, how are we going to do all of this? And we don't know, but we'll give it a good go. We've got the project plan working out. It just kind of depends on what comes up in between now and October.
Yes, I think there's some details there that we won't take too much time on. But for example, if we look at the partners on data, so that we are collecting the data well, securely, with all the necessary contingencies. It's been great to get the input from Gary and Lisa and others on that, and we've certainly had good conversations, and we've got a couple of options there for companies like Roy Morgan and Web Central, Web Survey, and a couple of others. Put together and are putting together some very solid proposals there. So that's progressing there. Yeah. I will say with the Q&A that we had with the potential research and evaluation partners, that was great. And since then, we've had at least 3 or 4 people we can tell are putting in a solid, high quality proposal, maybe 3. So we're looking forward to getting those.
Yeah, and they're all coming, I think, from consortiums of several different organizations. So that's really exciting as well, because as I said, there's quite a bit of interest, and certainly a lot of interest in the project, and then also in the evaluation of the project.
The survey questions we'll talk about a little bit later on. That's also another important thing. A lot of people wanting to say that until we see what the questions you're asking, we can't really comment very sensibly on this project. But of course, we've got several stakeholders, particularly you guys, involved in that, and we'll talk about that shortly.
Anything else in regards to the project?
Literature review, you mentioned that.
We haven't mentioned that one, so I might cover that one when we talk about the research and evaluation working group update. So
ethics, we'll talk about ethics.
Ethics as well.
We'll talk about that later.
Do you mind if I make a quick comment?
Sure.
It's Lisa. Look, this is a bit of self-interest actually, so maybe it represents a conflict of interest. But I just wanted to flag that the impact in Victoria of going to stage 4 is really significant, and it's really significant for any university providers in particular, but also for any service providers. And I just wonder whether it's going to put any submissions that have got Victorian partners at a disadvantage. Yes. Because people have been so extremely distracted by what's, kind of getting played out at the moment. So I don't know what your timelines are and whether, but I just wonder whether, from a fairness and equity point of view, whether considering like putting the submission date back a week in the context of that might be something to consider.
Yep. I mean, I think that sounds quite reasonable to me, Lisa. I'd be interested to see whether or not anybody else in the committee has any thing to say on that, or James.
Dan has a comment, I think.
Well, I would imagine at the moment that a week is probably not going to make a whole lot of difference in the context of the state that we're all in. I mean, I'm in stage 3, so it's not so bad outside of Metro Melbourne. So for people like, you know, La Trobe and Ballarat or Fed Uni and Deakin, you know, they have options outside of Melbourne. I suppose a lot of universities will be, you know, running their operations from people's homes like the rest of us. But I'm not some of the partners, it might be a difficult ask at present.
Gary, did you indicate you wanted to say something? Sorry, Anne, I'm taking your role.
No, do.
No, so I'm just wondering about the project altogether, to be honest. So with COVID-19 and certainly what's going on in Victoria and certainly in some of the other jurisdictions, I'm just wondering whether or not there might need to be a pause, to be honest. I think the vagaries of COVID-19 pandemic are just that, they're vagaries. So I don't know whether or not there's a plan to address that, but it would seem to me not only have you got issues in terms of providers and people who are responding to requests for tender, but just the whole modality that's being contemplated here of door knocking. I think I got a question its viability, to be honest, at the moment.
I guess, Gary, just 2 quick responses. That one, we have put to our funders 3 levels of contingency, A, B, and C. And C involves a complete redesign, if you like, of the project that doesn't include door knocking there. And we're waiting to see whether they give general acceptance of that, so we don't lose the funding. And that gives us a great deal of scope to redesign if we do get that approval there. The 2, I would, you know, I think it's something that we could also get some input from a health authority as well too. As I said before, up in Queensland at this right now, there are door knockers, about 100 of them right now through Royal Morgan, going house to house doing their standard survey protocols, and they're about to start in some of the western states in at the end of this month, I think, as well too, on another project. So people are doing the door knocking in states that are not in any form of lockdown at the moment there. So I'd still argue that we may need to curate it, and given our A, B, and C contingency, I think, which we're happy to share with you if you want to have a little cast your eyes over that, or we just wait to see if we got sign off first from the funders, because we put it to them. If they're happy with it, then that gives us much more room to move in this project.
Look, and I think just to say that I think almost certainly what we're definitely going to do at a minimum is not do ACDC in Victoria in 2020, potentially not in New South Wales either, just depending on where things go. So the first contingency was to exclude the states where there's community transmission of or significant community transmission of COVID-19, and to double up on some of those other states where it's the environment or it's more safe and it's the right time to be doing that. So that was our first kind of preference in how to respond to the risk of COVID-19. The second one was, as he was suggesting, maybe putting a pause and perhaps not doing round 1 until next year at all. We can certainly find some other work to do and things in the meantime, and other design points. And then, as Bill was saying, the third and more drastic contingency for the ACDC project would be a full kind of redesign to try and see if we can get the same outcomes without using the door-to-door approach, which seems unlikely. We'll have to compromise quite a bit on what we're wanting to get out of the ACDC project. But so that's the kind of conversations. At the moment, our funders are reasonably confident, or quite confident actually, that there's no chance that the funding is at risk for the project. They want the project to happen, the funding is locked in, and they're quite pragmatic with the impacts or understanding of the impact that COVID-19 will have on this particular project. Having said that, our funders and our grant managers at the NDIA aren't going to continue to be our grant managers for too much longer, because the information linkages and capacity building components of the NDIS is being transitioned over in the next few weeks from the NDIA to the Department of Social Services, so closer to you, Gary, in Canberra.
Yeah.
And we think that's, well, the ministers, from what they told us, is suggesting that there won't be any changes at all, but it does add an element of the unknown to the project, and particularly about, like you were saying, the viability for COVID-19.
But,
So anything there?
yeah, well, just don't forget also one of the key points is we're using local people in the local area. So if Bunbury in Western Australia is one of the chosen sites, the organisation will be an organisation in the Bunbury area using people from that local area there. So it's not as if we're moving people interstate round and we've got strangers going into your town. We'll actually have people in.
No, I understand that. I just think that you certainly anecdotally you're hearing that people aren't answering the doors to the police in Victoria and in other places, which I think you know, you run into a risk of really compromising your sample, because, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm a bit reluctant to open the door to people even in Canberra, and we don't have any active cases. So I'm just wondering whether or not you need to, and I don't want to, you know, cause any more angst than necessary, but certainly in my space at the moment, we've just been putting aside whole projects. We're doing weekly analyses which we've never done before in the history of AHW. In fact, in another part of AHW, they're doing daily analysis of data. So we've had to change completely our way of doing business. And certainly that's what I'm having reflected to me from my state and territory mental health colleagues in particular, with them saying that you know, they're just doing business completely differently, and it's got a real operational focus rather than anything else. So I just raised it as a concern that I think you might need to deal with, and I'm heartened to hear that you've already had discussions with the funder, because it wouldn't require anything too more different, I wouldn't think, to find others in more serious stages of lockdown.
Well, yeah, thank you, Gary. And like I said, we've got those contingencies there. I think the question, what we don't have is an understanding of when those contingencies get triggered. So that's something that maybe we can take some suggestions from the steering committee and from other stakeholders into consideration. But if it's all right, maybe we'll pause that conversation and come back to the point that Lisa had raised.
Thank you. I was going to come back to that one, James.
Do you mind if I respond to what Sam was saying? And I think it's what Sam was saying was correct. But I just wanted to sort of take you to the realities a little bit more of what it means for even for university staff who are online at the moment. But the difference that stage 4 represents, particularly for women who are working in universities, is that if they've got children, they're now reverting back to homeschooling, which places extraordinary pressure on families in terms of just making that adjustment. What we found last time when the kids were homeschooled was that, you know, people just needed a bit of time to get into the routine, and then things kind of settled a bit. But it's just really hard to think about the idea that people are preparing a big project plan for us, and also coping with, you know, those things in the background. And I just wonder, and I suppose I'm raising it just to see whether, you know, we could create a little bit more of a level playing field for the people in Victoria to have a little bit more time as they adjust to the stage 4 restrictions. And I suppose also as they're negotiating other partners who are also, while they're, you know, sort of caught up in the chaos of moving to stage 4. But I'm sure we're all going to be all right, you know, like everything will be fine. And Sam's quite right, you know, like we're all used to being online, but there are those other dimensions to it.
Lisa, I think you're suggesting is if we're considering, and this is the response for proposal, right, for the partnerships, research and evaluation partnerships. What you're suggesting is we might want to think about a little flexibility in the timeline for either our Victorian providers or extend it to everybody to level the playing field. But that your suggestion is Victoria may need, going into this lockdown, a little bit more flexibility around the deliverable time. Is that correct?
Just 1 or 2 weeks even.
Yes. I was going to, you said 1 week, Lisa, I was going to push it to 2. Not to be too generous, but to at least to give, to give that ample latitude, given everything else. I personally, obviously we'll discuss it amongst the team, but I don't see a problem. And if there's nobody else on the steering committee that has a violent objection, then that's
yeah. Look, and I don't think it's gonna. I don't think it'll impact on the whole project too much by doing so. My concern. Look, originally we were going to go 2 or 3 weeks earlier with the request for proposals, and the hope to have them in for this meeting so that the steering committee could be a part of looking at that one. And then we didn't go as quickly as possible because we had a couple of other things come up with some other partners, and we wanted to adjust the proposal and make some adjustments and stuff, and that's all fine. So then coming into this meeting, we haven't got that, and we'll talk a little bit more about evaluation of the proposals when they come in. But then, so in terms of the timeline, I'm thinking more it's about the proposals coming in and then having time for the steering committee to, or for the working group, if the working group's going to be involved in that process, just do the evaluation of the proposals, and so that this committee can, it sinks in time-wise. So we can talk about that a little bit because I've got that as an agenda item around that. But apart from that, I think there's no reason not to show or demonstrate that flexibility, like Bill was saying, 1 week, maybe 2 weeks. And my suggestion would be, so maybe I make contact with the lead person of each of the proposals that we know that we're going to be receiving, and discuss it with them. And I'm thinking that if we extended the deadline by a week or 2 weeks, would we want to extend that to all providers?
I think so.
I think that would make sense.
Make it a level playing field.
And to be honest, I think maybe there's one that doesn't have a provider in Melbourne, but I think everything else that I'm expecting has got some kind of stake in Victoria. So I think it just makes sense to extend that.
Okay. Cool. So that will be a decision you will make. Can contact all the providers, and we'll make that a new date. You'll come back to at least the working group the new date.
Yep.
All right. To Gary's point, let me come back a little bit to Gary's point, and correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, because I may not be. But I think one of his questions was, when do we trigger the contingencies?
Well, mine.
And I know it's really difficult. I think we have to go by government guidelines. And Gary, was that your question? Am I correct?
I think we're proceeding down a path that's almost ignoring the COVID-19 pandemic, and it seems to me it's having a irrevocable impact on Australian society, and we need to be thinking about that. And unless I've got it wrong, certainly, look at our Victorian friends, look at New South Wales, it will cause havoc with the proposed methodology, in my view, if you're trying to knock on doors. Yes. One, you may not be allowed to do it, and secondly, I think people are getting very nervous about contact with people, and that seems to me to be the methodology. So I think we need to be thinking about how might we do it differently, and I'm really heartened by the comments made by Bill, that they've already had discussions with the funder, because it would seem to me, whether we like it or not, that's likely to be where we might be going, because I just question the viability from two points of view. One, things might get worse and we will be locked down by government decisions, but secondly, that the population is just not going to be all that keen on opening the door. And if you can't, the figures coming out of Victoria are very disconcerting. 800 people knocked on the door by police, won't open the door. Yeah. They can't find them.
Yes. No,
Sarah, can I just get a comment from Sarah? Sarah, I was going to come to you. I'm so glad you put your hand up. From the carer's point of view.
Yeah, I guess I can see what's being said, like it's Gary, isn't it? But I guess I'm also thinking as well that people are nervous about answering doors. However, there are more people around, I think, that are quite anxious and fearful, and it actually might be perfect timing for them, for someone to come knocking on their door and talk about their mental health. So I'm sort of, I guess, in two minds about it. Yeah, so I just wanted to sort of say that. I actually coincidentally had some people in my street just before this meeting doing fruit fly inspections. So they've got bright orange uniforms and the ID badges, and they're obviously not police, and I knew that they were around in the community. So I felt okay about talking with them, and I showed them in my back garden. I don't know, I have lots of, I think, yeah, this project's different to police, because I think that people have different views about police, and yeah, it's complicated, but I guess in some ways I think this could be good timing.
I think one of the thanks, Sarah, I think one of the things, Bill, I know you talked to me yesterday about, and it might be an idea to bring up, and I'm really conscious of time here because we need to go through the agenda. But talking, and I know Sam has a comment too, but you are intending to do a pilot with the team and to test the applicability of this and the appetite of people to respond.
That's right, Anne, and that'll be a very small little trial that the team themselves will do. That was the intention there. So we'll get some real world data on that, and you know, I think that we'll trust in Allah but tie up our camels. So we'll have the contingency plan, and I'm very cognizant of what Gary has just said there, and I totally get it. But at the same time, you know, from my own coalface experience, I'm a little bit with Sarah's there. I think if we can pitch it right there, there's actually a sense of people coming to check in how you're going during this difficult COVID time that we can work with. And we've had some conversations with Are You OK, who wants to, in a sense, partner with us as well too here. So we will somehow, and we may even use their symbolism a little bit in how we deliver the door. So really, you've got, you know, you're doing a bit of Are You OK, checking with each household how you're going during the COVID-19 period. If we can pitch it in that way, we might get over some of the anxieties and fears. But it's a delicate balance, so thanks for wonderful input.
Yeah, I do think a test is going to give us a real indication. So, you know, before we go out broadly, I think test.
And we can also talk to Roy Morgan. We've got a really good open door with them. How they're going in Queensland right now with their door knocking. What's the working? Are people not opening the doors as much? Because they'll have a really clear statistical base for before and after COVID in terms of.
Queensland is going to be very different to to New South Wales and to Victoria. And very different again to Western Australia, Northern Territory and South Australia.
That's right.
So I think that will be just for Queensland, which will be good anecdotal responses in Queensland. Sam, you had a comment.
Well, I'm probably with Gary to some degree, because I think, I don't know if you're all getting a sense of the stage 4 restrictions, particularly in Melbourne, and how dystopian it really is. And it's not just the police who are going around. There are other DHS people going around. There are people taking food. There are people coming and going all the time. And I understand we're saying not to go near Victoria at the moment. But I don't know, even when we do get back to our new normal, whether that is people are going to be wanting people at their door anytime soon. And so I was just thinking about whether there was any opportunity, you know, through the COVID funding that the Commonwealth has put out to, you know, some of the big mental health partners in order to enable, you know, people like Beyond Blue, et cetera, et cetera. I just wondered whether there was any opportunity to reshape the piece of work to almost like tag on the end of, or tag in some way on people calling in through there. I don't know if I'm making myself very clear, but if someone was ringing in because they, you know, wanted some assistance with their mental health, and at the end of it there was an opportunity to ask them some other questions, there might be opportunities through those groups, and you might get a fairly good demographic spread. Anyway, you hear what I'm saying? It's just an idea. So or family and carer groups through the current network of service providers,
Yep.
through the family and carer groups as well, who are already meeting online and doing those kinds of things, particularly in Victoria at the moment. And so there might be opportunities through those. You're not going to get just your general cohort, punter, but it will give you, a broader, well, at least some access without people just slamming the door in our face, or, if it's a Roy Morgan ringing, hanging up the phone, that kind of thing.
No, that's
In
great.
other words, get creative, Sam. Thank you for your thoughts.
Yes, I think that's it. It's a matter of creativity, and if we have to resort to some of the contingencies, then we'll definitely need some creative input. Unfortunately, we don't have an old-fashioned thing called the telephone at home anymore, because that was the classic way people would do surveys. But it's likely most people have moved on to mobile that are not listed in a thing called the white pages anymore. I understand it's a lot harder.
All right, let's move on if we can, because I'm very conscious of time. So, James, where are we at next? And if that was a project update, it was a really good one. Thank you.
So up to the updates from the working groups. Now, we've got 4 working groups that we've intended for the project. 2 of them have had a meeting each. We've got the door knocking working group meeting again this Friday, and then the remaining 2, the information products and the education work and training working group, they're still to be initiated. So in terms of an update, there won't be much from those latter 2 groups, and I haven't delegated anybody from the research and evaluation working group to report back to this meeting now. So if either Gary or Lisa or Ingrid want to, then you'd be welcome to. But otherwise, I'll just do a brief recap of some of the things that we talked about in that what I thought was a very good hour and a half that we spent talking about quite a few different significant considerations for the evaluation of the project. So we talked about, as I was saying before, the request for proposal for the evaluation of the project. One of the things that's come out of that is that we've put a little bit of a pause on the research components of the ACDC project and focused on getting the evaluation partner up and running, which was always intended to be the larger of the 2 things. And I think with the funding that we have for the research components of the project, we need to take some time to really look at how that would look, particularly because another part of what we agreed in the research and evaluation working group was around the data collection and storage, and the need to probably procure those systems from a reputed and experienced partner who can help us to set up an app on our tablets, and also to help us with maintaining a data file and the security of people's information that is collected through the ACDC project. So we've spoken with Roy Morgan. We've also spoken with another provider, Bill mentioned, Web Survey, and they're both putting in sort of quotes for that. And we've also made it an optional part of the evaluation request for proposal. But once we figured out how much all of that will cost, and we'll figure out how much might remain that we can put towards separate research components of the ACDC project, then we'll be able to move forward with that. We're intending the research components to be more towards nuanced analysis of some nuanced findings, if there are any interesting findings that we learned through the project that a research partner wants to look at, rather than through the research looking at the more broad prevalence or impact of the ACDC project. So prevalence of the project would more look at doing perhaps ourselves just through some analysis of the data, or in partnership with the evaluation provider. We'll see how that goes. And then the impact of the ACDC project, measuring or researching the impact of the ACDC project, we've made that a core part of the evaluation request for proposal there. So that's partly where we sat in the working group with, or where we've implemented some of the discussion that we had in the working group with regards to those.
Ethics.
Yeah, so ethics. We talked in the working group about ethics and about whether we need to get an ethics review, ethics approval for the entirety of the ACDC project, or whether we perhaps shouldn't. So there's a few considerations here. One is that it's not a condition of the funding for the project. Two is that we understand that there's some precedence for doing door knocking without necessarily having ethics. But we also understand that there's some precedence for doing a national project like this where ethics would be sought and achieved. So Lisa, you suggested that we speak with Sarah. What's Sarah's last name?
Which one? Which
Sarah
Pollard.
Pollard. With regards
Sarah.
Yes, with regards to the trajectories project, and I don't know if I shared with you, but her response was that yes, they definitely, and they did definitely get ethics approval for that project. So so that kind of leaves us with a bit of a foot in both camps, and then there's some different opinions from different members of this committee and the working group as well with regards to that. So where we're sitting now is we're going to speak a little bit more with the private organisation Bellberry, who do ethics, and get a quote for them and get an understanding from them about how much work it would take for us to get ethics approval for the project, and then take it from there. So it's still,
they've got a maximum of 2 weeks to 4 weeks turnaround once we've provided them with all the information there. So one of the key problems, one of the key issues with getting ethics approval is the time delay it could actually take. And also too, if you're doing it through a university, as we understand it, in a sense, the ethics body does it almost as if the university was doing this project. So they really take seriously all the potential risks and liabilities that the project actually has, whereas a private provider would be not so encumbered with that requirement there. So Bellberry, the costs look broadly ballpark affordable there, but we still have to have more. So I guess it's interesting amongst people in the working group. We've got a bit of pro and con, and so we're a bit divided there. But at least we're continuing down the path to investigate, and we'll come back with some decisions soon.
That's great, and I think just for all of the working party, this is we just have to remember that the research and evaluation partners will definitely have to get ethics for their components. So, you know, for example, if you were doing the group who are doing the evaluations or doing any research, they will go to ethics for sure. This is a separate kind of ethics approval, overarching approval process, which, you know, is outside of my experience really. I mean, even the trajectories project's a much smaller project. We're not talking you know, like, I mean, that would have been, you know, if that a $500,000 project. And how big is our project? How much is the funding, the overall funding?
Well, if it's GST inclusive or exclusive price, it's a GST inclusive at 6.6 million.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite extraordinary to, and also then, you know, how you manage all the different partners and all the different states and everything. Anyway, but if you've got a private provider who knows how to do that, that's great.
And there is a cost per site in the Bellberry quote as well too. So with 24 sites, that does blow it out quite a bit. But Gary looked like he might have wanted to say something there.
Yeah, just to put on the record again, I'm pretty strong on, I think this is a real risk for the project. Given the nature of the population and the things that you're doing, I think you need ethical approval. The converse is what I'm going to. So if something were to go wrong, and, you know, it gets scrutinised and it hasn't had ethics approval, then you're in a world of hurt, I would think. So, and it also gives you a level of comfort, I think, if you've taken it to an ethics committee, independent, you know, an eclectic range of individuals. They've had a look at it and they've said, it's okay, you can proceed, rather than going, whoa, you're doing what?
Yeah, okay. They probably will go that. But no, thank you, Gary.
Yeah, no, look, and we spent considerable time in that working group meeting on this matter, and then since then, Bill and I and the team, and Lisa as well, we've had a conversation with just around kind of where to from here. I'm very keen that we want to make the right decision the first time, and for that reason we just want to get all of the information that we can. So we'll talk with Bellberry, we'll see what they have to say, and
just to add in from my point of view, from a commercial point of view, if you're dealing with people's data, then you need this extra level in any shape or form in today's world. You better be sure that everything is incredibly secure and have ethics behind it.
No, thanks. Well, that's also why we would pay, rather than my original idea, which I know people died when we're doing it through SurveyMonkey, that went down like a lead balloon.
Yeah.
So no, we'll make sure the company, it's very high level encryption. The information disappears off the tablet the moment it's gone in. So even if you lose the tablet, it's not there. All sorts of considerations. Information
in the online never gets lost. So just bear that in mind. Somebody somewhere can always find it. So it never gets.
That's what you pay for the encryption and high protected service. But no, I think the other consideration is that you can't really publish an article in a peer-reviewed journal unless you've got ethics approval as well too. I think Lisa was explaining to us. Mind you, that will be something we hope the evaluation partners mainly do, but we want to leave open the option of being able to do that as well.
Cool. All right. Moving on, James.
Moving on. So, so the other thing with the research, the other major thing with the research and evaluation working group is the groups that suggested that we look to commissioning a literature review. So we've gone ahead and done that. I've got the draft report back just last Friday or Thursday from the partner who did that literature review. We've actually this morning gone back to that partner to think, well, we have a third research question that we'd like to respond to. So the research questions that they did look at through the literature review were around what does the literature say about the prevalence of an unobserved mental health need in communities in Australia? And then the second research question was, what's the literature say about the efficacy of projects or programs that incorporate a similar proactive outreach approach to the ACDC project? And then the third question, which we've gone back to them to say, well, look, we think maybe we should expand our literature check to answer this question, is more a definition question. When we're talking about mental health needs, forget about whether they're met or not met, or whether they're observed or not observed, but whose needs are we talking about? We open the door and we're speaking, or somebody opens the door for us and we're speaking with them, and we start talking about mental health needs, and they say we don't have a mental health need, but family member or carer or something like that says that yes, they definitely do.
Huge mental health needs.
So it's those kind of almost philosophical questions that we really need to, we feel that we really need to get a solid evidence-based definition for what we're looking to what we're looking for the ACDC to be an intervention for, if that makes sense. So as I said, we've got a draft report back for those first two questions, and we're asking the provider to see if they can, probably at an additional cost to ourselves, but see if they can also look at reviewing that third question. Were there any comments from the committee about those research questions, or is there anything else that we should be asking to get a literature review for, just while we have you all here?
I saw Sarah's head nodding on that issue of what do we mean by need, and I certainly from the coalface from my time on the field, when I would address carer support groups, I would get quite a different sense. They were up there, would be asking, well, you've got these great services, Bill, but how can you connect with the person at home who doesn't want to connect with any services, don't feel they have a need, but really I'm not waving drowning. There's a huge need. So whose need is that? And what do we mean by need? There's some things we need to tease out and see if the literature has anything sensible to use that will be helpful.
Just really to inform our initial assumptions and theoretical underpinnings for the project. So, Cool. And
just let me, and I can see Kerry nodding there, but Kerry, I'd love your comments if you have any. You're obviously across all of this.
Yeah, no, I'm very keen to hear the results of this. I think, as Sarah was indicating through her nodding, that there's a tremendous disconnect between perceived need and actual need, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes through. Yeah. That's.
It also relates to the social and emotional well-being perspective, because where you've got more a group need rather than an individual focus too. So it has echoes in that context as well too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Will you be looking at the family needs at all?
Well, I guess we're yet to have a second conversation with the people doing, Alan and Clark, who are doing the literature review there, but I will certainly throw that perspective in as well too, because it's important as well too.
Again, Sarah is nodding.
Sorry, I'm a big nodder. But yeah, I definitely agree, because, you know, if you do come across carers who have never thought of their own needs at all, and then someone comes to the door and starts talking about mental health factors, yeah, there will be a lot of unmet need out in the community.
Yes. But I guess the issue there is that also too, you have say somebody that's extremely unwell, but you ask if you've got a problem, have any needs, and they're going to say no, but they're in a very, very clearly unwell state there, and the carer's feeling that the person has a need, but if the person themselves say they don't have a need, is there a need, or whose need is it?
That has to be addressed. Yeah.
Yes, and you know, if you think of it as a physical illness, I've got advanced diabetes, but you know, I haven't got a need. I don't care. Has this person got a need because they say they don't have a need, or do they have a need for medical intervention? That's
and who decides, and where do we put the needle in regards to self-determination versus safety and kind of protection of people? And you know, there's a few questions that we'd like to.
Get the language.
I have ideas. Bill has ideas. I'm sure we all have ideas about. But I think potentially it would be good for us to have a defendable approach to what we think the ACDC project is going to make a difference for. So
yes, I think this complexity was always implicit in the project, and what we've done is we've just teased out this issue, and let's see if we can pull it apart, get some clarity on it.
And I just want to make sure we collect comments from sort of relevant people. So Ingrid, we haven't heard from you, and I know Mental Health Australia has a lot of experience in this area. So are there any comments you want to add here?
Thank you. Yeah, no further comments from me at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want you to know that I was just checking in with you. Okay, James.
Just thinking about the time, I think we've got to crack on. So can we, do we have somebody reporting back on the door knocking working group?
Yes, that's moi. So Fiona sent her apologies. She's not at this meeting today, but she would have reported back to you. We had the first meeting 2 weeks ago. We've got just 3 members to start with. So we've got Jane, who's a carer, Anne, who's a consumer, and Fiona. And the idea is that the working group will decide what gaps and what challenges there are, and decide how we might meet those. So whether we consult with experts or whether we get people on the working group, we'll be working through those sort of issues at the meetings. The first meeting, we were essentially getting our heads around the project and the guidelines, bearing in mind that the guidelines target the organisations who will be contracted to do the door knocking, and the door knockers or the people connectors who do the knocking. So looking at them from their perspective. The working group members, in spite of their small size, gave lots of really excellent input and feedback. And we are currently in the process of incorporating that feedback into the guidelines. So the sorts of things they raised, there was quite a bit around the site's pre-engagement activities. So the engagement with LACs and with how we plan to door knock Aboriginal communities and so on. There was quite a lot of input around the risks of door knocking. Some really good input on use of interpreters that had us all trying to work out exactly how we were planning to do that. There was some good feedback about just education on the NDIS. So we need to have the people connectors. They probably are up on, accessing it and so on, but we need to make sure they are. There was also quite a bit, which we've already talked about, on communicating with carer and consumer groups about the project. And Hanina's already talked a little bit about that. Yes, so the next meeting is this Friday, as Jane said, and we continue to receive input and feedback on the guidelines, particularly filling the gaps, but also bearing in mind that the guidelines are a living document and they will continue to evolve throughout the project. That's it in a nutshell.
Thank
Any
you,
questions?
Margaret. That's great. Do we have any questions for Margaret?
Cool.
Thank you. Good information. Thank you.
Can I suggest we move right to the for review and advice section?
I would absolutely, James, but before then, I think this might be a really good time to go through sort of a process of how the working group will come to decision making or recommendations back to the steering committee and what our expectation is. My understanding is our responsibility as a steering committee is to review the documents, understand them and provide comments back pre our meetings. And then our accountability is to then say go, no go to any decisions that are or recommendations that come from the working groups. But you might want to sort of broaden that to a specific process.
Yeah, so for all of these next 4 points, the for review and advice, A, B, C, and D, Anne and we were talking yesterday, and we think probably the best use of the time that we have here and is to maybe delegate the development of these documents and these points to the working groups, and then the working groups bring these back to this steering committee for a final sort of advice on go or no go for each of them. So so we're not going to take the time up in this meeting reviewing the door knocking guidelines, which is a 65-page document, but rather would like for each steering committee member to have a working knowledge of those of what's contained in those guidelines, for the working group to take the responsibility to co-design them with us, and then for the working group or for us to bring them back to this committee in their final form to kind of, I don't think we were approving them in this committee, but giving approval from the committee for us to proceed with the documents in their form. So similar with part A, the proposal selection process for the ACDC project evaluations. We've talked a bit about this before. I wanted to just get a sense of agreement from this committee about how they'd like to be involved in assessing and approving the successful applications for or proposals for the evaluation of the ACDC project. So as I said, we'll receive them in 2 weeks, possibly 4 weeks if we give out an extension. And maybe there's people either from this committee or people in the research and evaluation working group who could work in with us to assess those proposals, and then we take the recommendations to this committee just for a thumbs up or thumbs down, rather than sort of bringing each of the proposals or a short list from the proposals to this committee. So what are people's thoughts about that? Are we happy to delegate a lot of that to the research and evaluation working group?
I see.
Yes or no?
There's a few nods.
And with consideration for Lisa being part of a proposal as well, so we'll work that out, that potential conflict there.
I presume I have to sort of stay right out of it, really.
We're kicking you off, Lisa.
Yeah, I already feel a bit like, asking for that extension, I already feel like that's a bit of a conflict of interest.
You're asking for all of Victoria.
Yeah, I'm asking for everybody. Really.
So who's on the working group? It's Gary, Lisa, Ingrid. Okay. So my question to them is, are you three on this working group comfortable with going through all the evaluations and then bringing the committee back your recommendations for us to do the go, no go, or yes, no type scenario? So Gary, are you comfortable with that? I knew he'd gone and had a cup of tea. Ingrid, are you comfortable with that?
Yes, so it will be tricky without Lisa, who brings a lot of expertise.
Well, I know that. I think Lisa will have to do, I don't know how you're going to work that out, James and Bill. Ingrid will be part of it.
And we could co-opt another person for that process as well, too, and which we'll discuss that.
Okay.
I think that would be helpful.
Working groups do have people not on the steering committee on them, obviously. That already is the case.
Yeah. Look, and I think even if it's just limited to helping us to somebody who's not involved in a consortia making a proposal, I'm sure we've got a few names that we can both think of who might be available to come and help us out with that. So if the committee's happy for us to take that approach, then perhaps that's what we'll do.
Yep.
Lisa?
Lisa?
I was just going to suggest that, you could even go back to the funders and see whether they had someone who,
that's a good idea.
That's sort of like a nice line of accountability back to them as well, if they have anyone they'd like to recommend.
Although we should note, and James did say it, I might have got lost there, that the section that's been managing the ILC grants down in Geelong is being dissolved. There's a few people lost their jobs. It's a bloody mess down there, apparently, from what we get, and it's moving entirely across to DSS to manage the whole process right now, which is hopefully should be okay. We'll see how we go there. It'll depend upon the people taking over the project. So, but still, the same point applies. We can maybe involve somebody from Canberra.
Just out of interest, are those people going to remain in Geelong, or is it going to actually be moving out of Geelong?
No, it's moving out of Geelong. It's moving to Canberra. So they actually have lost their jobs. People have been made redundant, and some of them were contractors, and just they ended their contract. Others who are employees of the NDIA are moving to other parts of the NDIA.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, when you think about that there was a deliberate move to have it actually based in Geelong, because it was actually in the context of the loss of the industry, the car industry down there. It's just extraordinary that that's been reneged on. But anyway, that's beside the point.
So in the interest of moving on, the process will be that the working group, with someone else co-opted in, or some other person co-opted in to replace Lisa, will review with the team all the evaluations and then come back to the committee with their recommendations. So that's how the process will work.
Yeah. So just on the next 3 points, so very similar conversations. I'd like to do the same kind of approach with the selection criteria and the expression of interest and such for the delivery partner organizations. Once we get to that stage, I'd like to have broad approval from this committee to delegate that to the door knocking working group, and then for the door knocking working group to come back with their final recommendations to this committee. Similar with the development of the door knocking guidelines, we want this committee to be across those guidelines, but that they'd sit with us and with input or with co-design from the door knocking working group, and proceed in that direction. And then again with the survey questions, but that will be sit with the research and evaluation working group. So are there any comments, feedback with our suggested or intended approach to what the steering committee's involvement would be going forward with those items?
Oh, we could. Do we have Gary back yet? Okay.
I think with the survey questions, I think there'll be something or other that'll be of general use, so general interest, I should say. So I would hope that when we get an opportunity also to send the early draft. What we're working on at the moment is a draft, so that rather than having a blank slate, we pulled out all the implicit objectives of this project, try to translate it down into a simple survey. Having conversations with the ABS and Roy Morgan has been helpful there. We're trying to curate a small set of suitable questions that balance lots of criteria. And there's, at this stage still, we have a part A and part B of the survey. So we've got essentially got a short curated survey and a potentially longer one is what we're working on right now. It's something other though that I hope, Anne, that and I'm pretty sure people will want to have a little bit of input into it, as well as just the research and evaluation working group.
I think there's a few different stakeholders that have things to say for that. So yeah, we'll be broad with the design of those questions.
Yep.
Good, thank you.
I just want to make this really clear. Is everyone comfortable with this approach? So the working groups will really do a lot of the evaluation and the reviews and make the recommendations and look at the drafts, and they will come back to this committee meeting with recommendations. But again, our responsibility is to review and understand and comment on all documents that come out from James and the team. And then we have the accountability for when the recommendation comes back from the working group to say yes or no or add further comments. Thank you, Kerry. I love your thumbs up. Just want to make that clear. This is the process and everyone's really comfortable with that.
Cool.
Good. All right, James. Do you have anything else you'd like to go over?
Not in that section, but when we get up to the next section, the other business section, yes.
Yes. All right, well, let's move on to the other business section if there are no further questions or queries around your processes or updates, and thank you for the updates. Okay, moving on.
So with regards to the next meeting schedule, so in the last meeting, we had agreement that would go to one additional monthly meeting, and then following on from that would go quarterly. So we're in August now, but this is our July meeting, and it got pushed back for reasons that we discussed. So we want to have another meeting for the steering committee at some point in the next month or so. And that could be in August, last week of August, let's say, or the first week of September. But then following on from that, we'll go a meeting in November, a meeting in February and May, and so on, so every 3 months. And I think it sounds like it's gonna be easier for people if we say for those quarterly meetings, it's gonna be the first whatever of the quarter or something like that, so that we can block that out in people's calendars in advance, and hopefully get the best chance of having full attendance at these meetings. So is that sitting all right with everyone?
So you make it a regular, either the first, second or third or whatever week of the month and a specific day going forward every quarter.
Yeah, and we can do a doodle on that even just to identify what that regular time is, because some people have already got regular committee meetings on the third Sunday in March. Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so James, first of all, we're going to come out with our next meeting either towards the end of this month or beginning of the next, which is end of August, beginning September. And then we're moving to the quarterly one where you're going to come out and ask for everybody's input on what is the best week and day of any particular month.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Cool.
So we'll do two doodle polls, doodle poll for each.
Yeah.
And we can take from there.
And we're probably talking about early September, so that we've been through the process of completion of the evaluation requests for proposals. So I think when you're 2 weeks on to 17th, we're into early September. So I think we're talking early September.
Yeah.
We'll probably have a lot more to say about a few different things. COVID-19 would be one of them. Ethics would be one of them. So it'd be good to have a few more weeks. Just the
response of the funding body to our proposal for contingency plans A, B, and C.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you so much. So we move to our last. I love how efficient we got. I thought we were very slow in the beginning, but oh dear, we've been very efficient at the end. I'd like to ask if there's any other business or anybody has anything they'd like to raise. And please feel free to do. Bill, did you raise your hand?
And just a question to the committee. We're wondering whether or not do we need to invite another person, consumer person, onto the committee. And this is not to be critical of Irene, who's I know got a lot of commitments, but it means that you know it wouldn't be unhelpful there. And you know, of course we've got. Well, Kerry's wearing 2 hats at the moment from the board of CMHA, and also her many other hats, but also too has the care hat, and ditto Sarah. And but it also might be good to get a second person with from the consumer lived experience perspective on there. And I just wanted to test the people. It does mean bringing somebody in a little bit late, but it still seems like a good thing to do.
Yeah, I'd support it, Bill. Yep. I noticed earlier Irene wasn't here, and it's a couple now that we've had without someone with.
Yeah. We're certainly not kicking Irene off or anything like that.
No.
And Irene's New South Wales based as well, so we might be looking at bringing in a consumer perspective from one of the other states.
Yes. Obviously, we've got some thoughts there. If anybody else has got any, you know, strong recommendations there, if somebody other that you think would be suitable and would add value, please, we're very happy to get any suggestions there.
Have you considered Deb Hamilton? Although she's in Newcastle, so.
Yes, it's in New South Wales again. But you know, I know of Deb. That's good. So we get happy. Let's get a little bit of a short list of a couple of possibilities there. That'd be great if anybody else has got any. Send through any suggestions. I know Ingrid through the on the register would know of several people as well too.
Well, you've got lots of nods and thumbs up here, so I think everybody's agreeing. Sam, how do you feel about this? You in agreement with this one? Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I've got Lisa and I've got Ingrid and Sarah nodding. Yep, got the, yep, cool. Everyone's really happy with that. Good. All right, so Bill and James, it would be your team's responsibility to bring whoever comes onto this committee up to speed to sort of feel comfortable coming in at a late stage, because anybody extra coming in causes a change, and the more comfortable we can make them with the information coming in is going to benefit us as a committee.
And we'll probably invite them to meet with you prior to the meeting as well, if that's okay.
Oh, I'm not the expert though. All right, so before we wind this up, I would like to say a couple of things. For anybody that has yet to complete what the requests were from the team, which were around the skills matrix and your bio, please do so. You know, this is really valuable for all of us to learn about everybody and have this information on file. I know most of you have been highly efficient. Every time I spoke to you, yes, I've done it. So I think we just maybe have a couple to come in. And the other one I have completely, it's gone out. Oh yes, so sort of topics for next meeting really, James, are going to be around the partnerships and communication plan, as well as your updates, of course, project update and working group updates. But partnerships and communications plan, a draft of position description for people connectors, and then really we will be talking a lot about delivery partners by that stage. But I have a feeling that most of the talk will be around COVID and contingencies, because I think we're going to be further down the track and we're going to have some input back from our contingency plans.
Yep, great.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Anne.
Yeah. I have one more business without notice. Oh, has it gone out of my head? Might have gone out.
Well, you don't do my trick.
Well, I'll fill a gap while he thinks of it there. I just wanted to acknowledge to the steering committee the great work that the team are doing too. They're in this difficult time. Everybody's working really well and really hard. The devil's in the detail. There's so many things that we're not able to share with you, and I know that people have been across and the consultation and the process, and this is a challenging project because it's not a ready, set, go, clear structure. We're doing something new here, so we're in the forming stage right now still before we move into the norming and the storming stage, and then we'll do reforming and renorming and restorming as we go through the different iterations. But that's great. It's a challenge to do that. And I know when we talk to the project, a lot of people are used to tell me exactly what you're doing so I can clearly evaluate it. And then we go blur and they go, I don't get it. And we go, well, that's the point, because it's a new project. We want you to work with us to help us get it. But still, the team have worked with that uncertainty, and we're creating something really clear out of it. But it's also great to get your really incisive input all the time. But yeah, just from me, a credit and thanks to the team for what they're doing and the hard work they're putting into the project. Now, did you think of the thing you didn't think of?
No, I didn't. Sorry.
So nice. Thank you. I will say that the team are always very responsive when I reach out to them, and I certainly respect that they bring me up to speed as much as possible, because I am the one that doesn't know what I don't know. But I'm enjoying learning. All right, so let me bring this officially to a close, and let me say thank you all for your time and input. I think I got a little input from all of you. Thank you for your contribution. I really appreciate it, and look forward to speaking to you in another month. And I am going to find out where Gary was. I'm kidding.
Yes.
All right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Good work, team.
Thank you very much. Lovely to see everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.